get this. A staggering 52% of all child workplace fatalities happen in just one single industry. 52%. And what makes that number truly shocking is that this specific industry makes up only about 5.5% of the total child labor force in the United States. We're literally talking about kids, sometimes as young as 10 or 12 years old, facing lethal risks on a daily basis, while the rest of the country kind of just looks the other way.
Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unraveling a massive, honestly startling legal paradox: why child farm workers globally and right here in the US lack basic protections. We're going to dive into the laws, the history, and the international standards that completely clash with domestic policies. Ultimately, we're asking why the very kids who help harvest our food are left so legally vulnerable.
Section 1. The deadly discrepancy.
When you look at the breakdown, it's wild. Agriculture accounts for more than half of all child workplace deaths in the U.S. Look at that 52% fatality slice. Now, compare that to traditionally hazardous jobs, construction, mining, oil, gas, which all combined sit at just 13%. The disproportion here is absolutely huge. Based on a Government Accountability Office report spanning from 2003 to 2016, agriculture is, without a doubt, the most lethal sector for young workers.
And fatalities are really just the tip of the iceberg, right? The injuries are severe, they're vast, and they're largely underreported. Between 2012 and 2014 alone, child agricultural workers suffered an estimated 10,000 injuries. We're talking prolonged exposure to extreme heat, operating heavy machinery, and contact with toxic chemicals. So it really prompts us to ask a very serious question. Why is this specific industry so perilous for youth? And where is the legal safety net?
Section 2. The Great Legal Divide.
To solve this mystery, we've got to look at the Fair Labor Standards Act, or FLSA. Passed back in 1938, this was hailed as a massive victory for labor rights, but beneath the surface, it creates this massive double standard between agricultural and non-agricultural work. Imagine two 14-year-olds for a second. The first one is bagging groceries. Under the FLSA, this kid has strict legal protections. They absolutely cannot work dangerous jobs, and their hours are strictly capped. But the second 14-year-old, the one out in the fields, legally, they're left incredibly vulnerable. They are operating under a completely different set of rules that allow for unlimited hours outside of school and exposure to severe hazards.
So the crucial point boils down to this stark legal contrast. In non-agricultural work, there's a minimum age of 14, a strict limit of 3 hours on a school day, and a total ban on hazardous work until age 18. But for child farm workers, especially those on family-owned or operated farms, that minimum age essentially vanishes. Kids as young as 10 or 12 can legally work. They can work unlimited hours as long as school isn't in session, and they face hazardous conditions that are strictly banned in every other industry.
Section 3. Origins of the loophole.
To understand why this bizarre loophole even exists, we have to travel back in time a bit. Why did the framers of the Fair Labor Standards Act intentionally leave farm kids out of the equation? Well, historical legal journals from 1939 show that agriculture was virtually exempted right from the very beginning. At the time the law was passed, agriculture was the largest single child employing field in the nation, making up a whopping 70% of all child laborers. Lawmakers knew that if they strictly regulated farm labor, they'd be completely upending the massive agricultural economy of that era.
And actually, it wasn't just corporate lobbying. This was driven by the crushing reality of Depression-era poverty. These exemptions weren't created because farming was deemed safe. Investigations even back then proved it was harmful. No, they were created because immense rural poverty meant families desperately relied on their young children's wages just to survive and buy basic necessities. The law was literally compromised to accommodate family poverty.
Section 4. The Global Agricultural Crisis.
Let's zoom out for a second. This historical reliance on child labor and farming isn't just some relic of the American past, it is an ongoing, massive global crisis. Globally, agriculture is by far the largest sector employing children. While manufacturing pulls in about 14 million child laborers and mining involves around 2 million, agriculture completely dwarfs them both. An estimated 60 million children are pulled into unpaid family farm work and commercial agriculture worldwide. That is a staggering number.
And the conditions they face? They're absolutely grueling. We're talking about 10-year-olds wielding machetes for long hours on Bolivian sugar plantations. We're looking at kids facing acute health risks from pesticides in India's cotton fields. We see children hauling incredibly heavy loads and clearing land on commercial plantations in the Dominican Republic. The physical toll on these developing bodies is devastating.
keeping millions of kids out of school and trapped in a vicious cycle of poverty.
Section 5. Violating international law.
Returning to the U.S., this domestic legal loophole is now colliding head-on with modern international human rights standards. The world has moved on since 1938. In 1999, the International Labor Organization, or ILO, created Convention No. 182. This was a monumental international treaty designed to eradicate the worst forms of child labor. Article 3D specifically defines this as work likely to harm the health, safety, or morals of children. The U.S. Senate unanimously ratified this treaty in 1999, making a formal, binding commitment to uphold these standards.
But here's where it gets absolutely mind-boggling. Despite ratifying that international treaty, current U.S. domestic policy allows for shocking exceptions. The Fair Labor Standards Act legally permits 16-year-old farm workers to use heavy machinery like forklifts and earth-moving equipment. They can operate chainsaws. They can handle toxic chemicals, ammonia, and even blasting agents like dynamite. Let that sink in. While an 18 age limit exists for these exact hazards in non-agricultural jobs, the FLSA drops it to 16 for farms, putting the U.S. in direct violation of the very international standards it agreed to.
The consequences of this hazardous exposure are undeniably grave. The ILO acknowledges that agriculture is one of the most dangerous sectors globally, estimating a horrifying 170,000 worker deaths annually across the world. And these fatalities are heavily driven by the exact types of hazardous exposures, machinery, pesticides, extreme environments, that our current laws just completely fail to shield children from.
Section 6. The path forward.
So how on earth do we fix a clearly broken system? Right now, there are an estimated 500,000 child farm workers in the United States alone. How do we ensure they aren't legally left out in the cold? Policy experts and advocates point to 3 key steps. First, pass the CARE Act, a piece of legislation frequently introduced in Congress aiming to raise the minimum age limits and hazardous work ages for farm workers so they actually match other industries. Second, remove those outdated FLSA parental exemptions that allow young kids to work unlimited hours on family-owned farms. And third, we need strict enforcement of global supply chain accountability, forcing corporations to ensure they aren't profiting from child exploitation at the very base of their agricultural sourcing.
Legal analyses, like those from the American University Washington College of Law, make it super clear. Patching these loopholes isn't just about updating a domestic law. It's about international accountability. Aligning U.S. domestic labor laws with international treaties like ILO Convention 182 is pretty much the only way to finally provide these children with the baseline protections they desperately need and, frankly, rightfully deserve.
I'll leave you with this provocative thought as we wrap up this explainer. Should a Depression-era legal compromise, one originally designed to manage extreme 1930s poverty, continue to dictate the safety and lives of 500,000 children today? Or is it finally time to close the gap and protect the kids who harvest our food? Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.